chair. I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Klare Scarborough. I'm an art historian. I'm also a curator and a consultant. I ran a university museum for 11 years, and now I've stepped away, and now I'm doing independent projects and having lots of fun. Published a book just 2 years ago almost, well, last year, right? Almost. Last year. Yeah, called Shifting Time, African American Artists 2020-2021, which is a documentary book about the pandemic. And I think that's all I'm going to say now. I'll pass it on.
I'm Yvette Wilson. I am an artist as well as a professor, and I work a lot with Davidson College on their art collection advisory committee based in Atlanta. My work is predominantly focused on the aftermath of colonialism, and I would say that's it for now, a little teaser.
My name is Tim McFarlane. I'm an artist living, working here in Philadelphia, and primarily my work is in painting, but printmaking has a special place in my heart because I love the processes when I was in school. And my work reflects a lot of observations of the world around me, specifically what I like to call the anonymous art making that happens in the street with how we interact with physical spaces and everything.
Great, thank you. Welcome everyone for being here tonight. I'd like to start out with just by reading the opening paragraph of my essay. It's printed, I think, up in the front, and I think it was parts of it were in the emails you received. So here goes. Flowing Abstraction highlights the creative process and the flow of artistic ideas and knowledge in contemporary African diaspora printmaking. Flow is a state of being associated with creativity and enhanced performance. Flow enters the creative process in moments when action and awareness merge, when artists become completely absorbed in their tasks and their sense of time slips away. While implying continuity, flow always exists in the present, inherently ephemeral, yet naturally intense and fulfilling. Flow may spur innovation and artwork that transcends expectations, end quote. So flow is really, in some respects, is kind of this zone of enhanced productivity. Some artists, some people refer to it as being in the zone. It's where everything just slips away and you're focused so intently on your work. Flow is a concept in the social sciences. It's very important. It's used in human resources, etc. And obviously in the humanities with art. So this exhibition features prints by 8 different artists, and 2 are here tonight to share information about their stories, their lives, their artwork. Tim McFarlane and Yvette Wilson. So we'd like to begin by just asking each artist to talk a bit about their artistic practice, how you come up with ideas in general, and what was your inspiration for the works that are displayed in the show?
Okay, so in terms of my artistic practice, it's very interdisciplinary, and my focus tends to be very language-based, specifically the English language. A lot of that for me stemmed from the fact that I have epilepsy, and I was unable to speak when it first developed. The foreign language center of my brain was where the damaged tissue was, and so during that time I really had to think a lot about communication and ways to do it without speech, and so text became a way for me to do that, but not writing physically because I could not hold a pencil. My hand is also affected, and so through that making process, or that thinking process, is how I arrived at the way that I make work today, and the reason why I make it. It's also how I ended up in the arts, because before I was a Spanish major, can't speak Spanish anymore, again, foreign language processing center. But that's a long way to say that I'm really interested in language, how it's traveled across the world, and since English is our world language, it goes back to the roots of colonialism. So really examining that and the things that we are taught as children rather than what we learn, like what we should be learning. And so, for instance, we have these nursery rhymes that we are taught all the time when we grow up, but we're not necessarily taught things about, let's say, incarceration or the history of these Western nations and these powers. So why is it that some things get taught and passed down, whereas others do not? I would say that's about my practice and how I started making.
Cool. So I already mentioned I'm primarily a painter, but my practice also extends to photography, mixed media installations. What else did I do? And I do some digital work here, here and there, mostly experimentation. And as I mentioned before as well, a lot of my work is based on observation of, the space around me and how I see different people interacting with space and how it changes over time. So one of the things that I like to do is, I take a lot of photographs, and I like seeing what changes, from day to day, week to week, or whatever. So, sometimes you walk past a space and there's a wall, someone will throw up a tag, someone will buff that out. There will be a poster put over something, and then somebody starts ripping down the poster. And so all these lives are interacting and intersecting in the public space, and we don't know who's doing what and who's making what. And that plays into another part of my work, which has to do with time and memory, because things change so fast, and things we can. Our memory is also very what's the word I'm looking for? Unreliable, and when things are changing in a physical space, say like, with gentrification, when, spaces are being changed radically, sometimes you can't even remember what was, in a place before, and you have to really think about, what was there. So in my painting, there's a multi-layered approach. There's a lot of call and response. There is, I don't necessarily make sketches for paintings or in a traditional way or anything. Everything is worked out on the canvas or on the panels and whatnot. So there's a lot of, layering in my work, and there's a lot of addition, subtraction until I get to a final result. And as far as like the work in the show that I have here, the glyphs that I use, that started back in like '99 for me, and I was thinking about using text in my work, but I didn't want people reading the paintings because that wasn't really what my work was about. I didn't want a direct message like that. So I just started doodling and drawing, and these glyphs just started happening, and often they started just like forming in grids and so forth. Skip ahead to I didn't know what to do with it then, so this is one of the things that I set aside. I tend to work on various ideas, and at one time I also tend to work on various works at one time. So I set that idea aside because my painting was taking precedence, and I was making a whole different body of work that had nothing to do with this. And but then around 2010 or so, the glyphs started coming back into my work. And then in 2018, I was one of 6 artists commissioned to make ceiling installations for the Philadelphia International Airport. And that's when I first publicly exhibited the glyph forms. And you can actually still see that installation there. It's in Terminal A East, so it's the international terminal. So yeah, I think that's it at the moment.
Interesting. And Tyler, about the works on display, A Child's Prayer and After a Time, I was fascinated to learn that there were additional verses to some of these nursery rhymes, and you've mined them and adjusted them so that there's a totally different meaning. Can you talk just a little bit about your process of doing that?
Yes, absolutely. So one thing when I am digging through archives, whether those are actual historical archives or they're simply memories, I find these intersections, these crossovers often in terms of the language that is used in these stories. So I search for common words and common names. And in this case, the common word is star. And so that is a combination of several nursery rhymes that are all blended to tell this one story. And even the fact that one of them references 7 stars, the Big Dipper, which was in the Underground Railroad, which pointed north and directed enslaved people who were running. That is also 7 stars, that exact constellation. And so making these connections between these age-old stories to then history to the modern day when we are looking at these constellations, this Milky Way thing, and really gluing it all together is how I would approach it and how I look at it.
Kind of like this temporal layering, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Interesting. Can we talk a bit more? You each talk about your experiences with the residency. I know you're just finishing up your residency, and Tim, your residency was right in the middle of COVID. So if you guys can talk a bit more about that, that'd be great.
So for my residency, I had the privilege to work with Leslie for this screen print, and this one with Alexi happened afterwards. I would say that on one end, my experience was beyond delightful. I had one of the best times ever. I was actually, at the end, I was hoping that something would go wrong with the screen print so that I could stay longer. And I was so sad that it was perfect. So that's, I guess that, and it was just a blast. Learning things that because this is my first time printmaking apart from at MICA, where I went to grad school. I was a graduate teaching intern with Yvette. And so beyond that, I didn't have much knowledge. And so being in this environment of kindness and support where I can learn and create was really, really fascinating, especially doing something that I didn't think I would ever be able to do because of my disability. Printmaking is such a physical task. And so like having this vision of something and then having an entire team of people to make that come to life was incredibly freeing. And just watching, I was filled with gratitude and respect for so many people in the residency itself. So yes, my experience was beyond positive. I learned so much. And I always talk about now how I'm a professional squeegee washer because I assigned myself that task.
Awesome. Yeah, my experience was also fantastic. I got to work with Alexis Nutini, and he's such a great guy. I've known him for a number of years, and being able to actually collaborate with him on, making the prints was fantastic. And getting the chance to do some printmaking again, because the last time I did it was in school, so it's been a number of years. And the tricky part, of course, was that, my residency was in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. And so that created some challenges. But being able to work with Alexis, who was, very open, and we have a very good communication with each other. So it started off with, I knew that I wanted to use the glyphs, first of all. And previously, and even now afterwards, most of the time I use them within dense compositions in my paintings, so they would, coexist with other mark making and everything. I wanted them to stand on their own. I wanted to do something where they stood on their own, and not only that, I wanted to make an edition that wasn't your typical edition of like the same image. I wanted to have a varied edition. So basically, they're all monoprints. And I wanted to experiment with space. I wanted to experiment with like placement of the plates in different ways. And so what happened is that in the beginning, I did some drawings, and I did like 5 drawings in marker. I took photographs of them. I emailed them to Alexis. Alexis put them through his router. He has an electronic digital router that he uses. And then within like a week or so, or whatever, we had like 5 plates. It would have taken me forever to carve out all of those glyphs and everything. So him having that digital router was absolutely amazing. So the first test, we did the first test, and basically I just emailed with him, talked with him on the phone, and just told him, we went back and forth with color and stuff like that. And so he just did like a few tests, and he sent me photographs of them and everything. And then finally we were able to be in person. And so we had like 3 long sessions in person, masked, and try to stay as far from each other as possible in the print studio. But it was an amazing experience, and given everything that was going on, I'm really thankful to Brandywine, and specifically to the former director, Alan Edmonds, who actually pushed, to have all this happen. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, great. Do you feel that your printmaking impacts your other practice, your painting, your other things that you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just doing these variable additions, it's like boom, 1, boom,
right.
2, boom. You're one after the other.
Yeah.
And in terms of flow, they're very freeing, I would think.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I love the process of printmaking, and specifically for me, it was stone lithography that I loved when I was in school. Grinding the stone down, getting your image on and whatnot. But even with just the layering, because the way that I paint. I paint in distinct layers, and the same thing happens with printmaking and whatnot. So it wasn't that far of a leap for me in terms of moving from one medium to the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how do you feel? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am an interdisciplinary artist again, but I primarily work with photography, video, and installation, and a lot of, again, text-based work. So with photography and video, at least the way that I use it, it's very quick. And printmaking is slow, very, very slow. But I found one thing at the residency that I found to be incredibly beautiful was how much my writing process lines up with the printmaking process, especially given that I am exploring material from a time period when printmaking was the primary communication method, or information was recited orally. And so in seeing that marriage between the two, because for me, one aspect that I always try to incorporate into my work is, does the meaning align with the actual medium, or does the message align with the method? For me, it's essential that there is a connection, and finding that my writing connects to printmaking in that way, in such a direct way, was incredibly fascinating. And I would say that that's what I learned during the residency and through printmaking, and that in this case, it was also the process matched the pace. So the pace of writing and the pace of printmaking. And in terms of flow, how when I do get into that writing and that digging, I just get wrapped in it, and I could be there for days and days or hours and hours just in the zone. So, yeah.
Nice.
Actually wanted to go back a little bit to the process because in the printmaking process, like you said, it is slower, and I tend to, like when I'm painting, things are happening fairly quickly at first, and then things are slowing down. I like to tell people that watching me paint sometimes like watching grass grow after a while, because I'm spending more time looking than I am painting after a while. I'm evaluating things, and so the same thing happens with printmaking, where you're thinking about color ahead of time. You're thinking about like where things are going to be placed ahead of time, how much pressure, so forth and so on. So it is slightly different in that way, but it lines up after a while, because towards the end of my painting process, I'm thinking more about what things are happening on the painting, where things are going to go, how things are going to change once I make a mark or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happens with printmaking. Mm-hmm.
It seems like the variable additions are more spontaneous. I mean, I'm sure they're slow in terms of, you're doing the layering, but each one is different, so just the time that it takes for that kind of thing, is it quicker? Is it more methodical? Each one's different.
Yeah, each one's different. Yeah. Printmaking is like a lot more methodical. But it, for me, it's sort of at some point it lines up in terms of what's happening and how fast things are happening.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You can experiment more with the variable additions. I guess that's what I mean.
Oh,
in terms
okay.
of,
in
terms
absolutely,
of being freeing.
Yeah. I was definitely into experimentation and just like trying to see just to see what happens, because I hadn't been able to print in a long time, and I didn't know when I would be able to print again. So I said I better make the most of this situation while I have it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Both of you, obviously you're very different in your approaches and your interests, but you both integrate language and graphics. You've spoken about this a bit. If you can talk more about that, I think it'd be interesting.
So for me, the text and image component, in terms of the graphic nature, the graphic element of the work comes because I do want it to be clear that I'm discussing bodies, so real people, in relationship to these narratives that are not always necessarily direct. So there are some works where I remove the body completely. And in those, the typography becomes the graphic. And the typography is always designed after ephemera that I've found in archives from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, whether they be about Western expansion or the railroads that were happening, or runaways, or maybe it's come to America, the land of opportunity. And so looking at those things and lining them up that way, again, so that the aesthetic itself is what's matching. So I'm really just borrowing a graphic from another time period, I would say, is how that works for me.
Your works look very cohesive in terms of matching, is it really? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, yeah, so just in terms of communication, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't want these glyphs to, they aren't a code for anything. They aren't an analog for, well, they're sort of an analog for language, but they don't have an inherent meaning of their own. And I think I'm thinking about a couple of things. I'm thinking about how we discover like ancient languages. We discover and try to figure them out, and we may be close to the original meaning, we may not. We don't know how much we've lost depending on, what it is that we're looking at. There's a mystery about that I like. There's a mystery about the possibility of someone looking at this and saying, wondering if it is an analog for a specific language or something like that. And the other thing is, I'm really involved. I like the idea of the layering of these. It brings to mind different conversations that are happening at the same time. Going back again to the idea I have about looking at the anonymous, how different people's lives are intersecting in public space, and you don't know everything that has been said or everything that's been done or who's doing what. So there's all these mysteries that are happening, and I think about it's not a specific thing, but looking towards the future, I wonder sometimes if any of this survives or whatever, if someone will try to ascribe a meaning to it like we have with, when we have discovered, old languages and whatnot. So that speculation is kind of interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Could you speak about just abstraction and flow, the concept of flow? You spoke about it briefly, and I think you spoke about it also, just in terms of processes or possibly mark making itself. A lot of the works I notice, your works have like kind of ribbony things, ribbony marks, things that, marks that kind of flow. So if you could just speak a bit more about that.
So for me, with mine, I would say the flow, as you said, it comes in through the whimsy of the nursery rhyme of the children's narrative, as well as flow through oceans and transportation in that way. And just these things that have connected us through time and that connect us, and when I say through time in this sense, I mean from one set of people coming into contact with others, and then how within these communities we have these narratives, these stories that are then passed down over and over and over. So in one end that's very, very magical, and then on the other it's crushing. And so opportunity and coercion exist in tandem, and that sort of conflict for me is where I can get lost in thought, in terms of really, that's the root and the flow for me. I guess, does that make sense?
Yes, your works also, just in terms of flow, your works have a really nice tension, like both of them, very, very, and I looked on your website, a lot of your works do. I think you're trying to kind of merge something.
Definitely true. Sure, absolutely.
Tim?
So for me, it's in the making of the mark. And basically, I'm sort of like it's all spontaneous. So I'm just going across, and then I'm coming down. And I know there's a word for that when you're writing in that way. But I do get kind of lost in just the making of the mark and continuing. And sometimes I'll superimpose like grids, just like you see here. I'll do that manually, and I'll just keep doing it, and it gets to a point where the glyphs start breaking down, and then almost like a third sort of form starts happening. So there's a different type of mark that starts, coming out of this sense of flow. And when I'm in the studio, I'm listening to music. So music has a big impact on what I do. Just thinking about the, polyrhythms, and thinking about like how different sounds, thinking about the levels of sounds that are in there, layers of sounds and whatnot that are in certain types of music. So that sort of gets into it as well.
Nice. Do you have any thoughts or comments about the exhibition you'd like to share with the audience?
So I'm just excited to be included because everyone here is a legend. And so to me, I was looking at the biographies of everyone, although it wasn't really necessary because, like I said, these are all iconic artists. But knowing that I'm the youngest one, is such an honor. And it's just beautiful to me to even realize, wait, I fit here. How cool is that? So I'm just sort of humbled and very appreciative.
You're also part of the history of Brandywine now because your works are in the archives, which is really also pretty cool.
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah. So yeah, same. I'm definitely like, when I heard this exhibition was going to be taking place, just having my work in the same room with Sam Gilliam, Julie Miretu, and everybody really, I was just wow, this is great. And when you're making work and when you're involved in making it work, you don't really think too much about anything really, and like I knew that my work was going to be, after doing the residency, my work was going to be a part of Brandywine and their archives, but it didn't really like hit until I started seeing the names come down, the list of names in this exhibition. I was like, oh wait, this is different. So,
Cool,
yeah.
cool. Yeah, I just have one comment to make about the exhibition. Throwing together an exhibition and an essay, and I did it in a very short time, and finding inspiration for a theme, something that can tie, 8 different artists together over 5 years' time. And I want to give a shout out to Anise Carr, the interview that happened. I guess I'm not sure when it was, but it was an ArtistsNConversation. And that was really inspirational for me for co-curating the show thematically. His work Cascade, which is on display, he talks about it being not just about the cascade and the flow of water, but he talks about it being the flow of information and the flow of knowledge that's passed on through Brandywine. Because we have 50 years of history here, and just being part of that history was really important in creating that work and in giving the title Cascade, because it's not just about water. It is about knowledge being passed down. It's part of the definition, which is really cool. So I wanted to say that, and great. At this point. We'd like to welcome questions from the audience. If anyone has questions, yes?
It seems that color choice is really important for both of you. And in printmaking, you can change colors so readily. So I wondered if you could tell us about color choices and what that does in terms of the image overall in both of your approaches.
So for me, I select colors that are either very, very bright and bold or somewhat muted. So there'll be blacks and beiges that are combined, or like I said, bold. And so for me, that is rooted in thermal photography and specifically thinking about heat-seeking technology and how machines see bodies and see color versus how humans do, and the relationship between technology in that sense. And so really mimicking that while also wanting to capture the glossiness of capitalism and how things are thrown in our faces to grab our attention. So combining those two is why I select the colors that I use. And then when I use darker colors, darker hues, that is simply because of darkness and what that means on multiple levels.
Yeah, color for me, it changes. So I'm really just interested in experiment and see like how different types of hues, come together. And sometimes it's light and dark, sometimes it's warm and cold. And it really just kind of depends on what mood I'm in. I don't have a specific palette or anything like that. But I do tend to like, seeing what kind of contrast I can get between hues and what kind of contrast I can get between tones and tints and whatnot.
Great. Yes, Matt?
Tim, although I feel like this could kind of be a Tyler question also, but I'll start with Tim. Thinking about the part of your practice that is probably like, your everyday life when you're going about the city and you're seeing, the kind of accretion on the built environment and maybe, the impact of humans on the natural environment. And then just thinking about these past years, which in a lot of ways have been so different, politically charged, socially movement charged, everything that came with the pandemic, everything that's happened since the pandemic. There's been so much focus on how cities are, in a way, like struggling post-pandemic in particular. And I've just been thinking about, like, over the course of your doing this, whether what you see in terms of this build-up on the built environment or the natural environment is kind of like a steady process, or whether it's had like kind of distinct moments over the past couple of years that you've noticed it might have fed into your work.
I think over the past couple of years, there's been more of a rise of graffiti and different sorts of things happening. And like just going through Center City, a lot of stores closed down and everything, and because of the civil unrest that happened, a lot of stores were boarded up and everything. So there was a lot more street art happening, a lot more people, throwing up graffiti and everything. But I think it is a constant thing in the environment. It's just that I think it was just more pronounced, in this case. Over the past few years. But in terms of my work, I noticed that happening. I don't know if it had a direct, impact on what I was doing, because this has always been something that's been a part of my thinking anyway. But I have noticed the difference.
Anyone else for questions? Michelle?
Hi, everyone. Not a question, but a comment. After the conversation is over, please, everyone, please take the opportunity to really look at the show, flowing through it. Because next week the show goes down and it travels to High Point and Minneapolis for a traveling exhibition.
Okay,
So
great.
I want you to take that opportunity, but congratulations to both of you for being part of this, for instilling in us and showing us your creative genius and sharing that with us. And also, Master Brenner is right back here. He missed all his kudos. Came in afterwards. This is Alexis, the Master Brenner. But I do want you to take the opportunity to really look at the show and really just feel yourself, as they are telling their story, feel your story also becoming part of their story, so that the story can continue.
Great. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Anyone else for questions, or we're good? We're good, okay, thank you. There's